Imagine being a 74-year-old prime minister, right? You command the full centralized weight of a nation-state apparatus, and you're overseeing your police forces as they violently crack down on thousands of young protesters.
Right.
Now imagine that less than a year later, that exact demographic hasn't just voted you out of office, they have actually elected a 34-year-old rapper to take your job.
Yeah, it's wild.
And his very first order of business, sending those exact same police forces to your door to arrest you.
I mean, it is the absolute definition of institutional capture. It completely rewrites our understanding of how quickly, democratic backsliding can be reversed.
Yeah.
Because we are usually taught that political change is incremental, right? That unseating entrenched power takes decades of this slow, grinding coalition building.
Sure, the usual political playbook.
Exactly. But what we are witnessing here is a complete structural demolition of the old guard. And it's executed at a speed that is, frankly, it's dizzying to analyze.
It really is. So, welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive. If you're listening to this right now, you know we don't just skim the headlines here.
Never.
Today, our mission is to explore a dramatic and truly unprecedented political transition happening right now in Nepal. We're going to examine how a youth-led movement didn't just disrupt the political status quo, but systematically dismantled it.
Yeah, maneuvering from raw street protests all the way into the highest halls of justice.
Exactly.
And to map out the sheer mechanics of this transition, we are relying on a highly specific stack of sources for you today.
We've got some great material.
We really do. We have these powerful, meticulously documented excerpts from a commission report. It's titled Justice and Accountability in Nepal's Post-Protest Transition.
Right.
And we are pairing that with a very urgent, highly detailed Reuters dispatch coming directly out of Kathmandu that tracks the real-time fallout of all this.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because whether you are a political scientist tracking global democracy, or maybe a legal scholar fascinated by the concept of command responsibility,
Oh yeah, big time.
or just someone captivated by how fast institutional power dynamics can flip when the right levers are pulled, I mean, this is an absolute masterclass. You are going to want to pay very close attention to the timeline here.
The timeline is everything. Because to understand the legal rationale behind the shock arrests happening today, we have to rewind the clock a bit.
Right to last September, right?
Right, to the intense political and social friction of last September. That was the real ignition point.
Right, the catalyst. Because before we can dive into the unprecedented legal strategy of, prosecuting a former head of state, we really have to understand the sheer force of the public anger that pushed them out of power in the first place.
Absolutely.
So according to our sources, last September, Nepal was paralyzed by these massive Gen Z-led anti-corruption protests.
And we really need to emphasize the tactical nature of that demographic shift here. I mean, this wasn't the traditional political opposition staging a permitted rally in a town square.
Not at all.
This was Gen Z. We are talking about a highly mobilized, digitally connected younger generation. They utilized decentralized organization to take to the streets.
And they're very focused.
Exactly. Their grievance was sharp, specific, and aimed directly at systemic corruption within the political establishment.
But the state's response to that decentralized organizing was brutally analog.
Yeah, unfortunately.
It didn't stay a peaceful standoff. The human cost of these protests was just staggering. And the numbers in the Reuters dispatch are, frankly, difficult to process.
They really are.
A total of 76 people were killed in just 2 days of unrest. I mean, let that sink in for you for a second. 76 lives lost in a 48-hour window of state action.
It is a devastating toll. Just a catastrophic failure of public safety. And the Commission's report places a very specific, intense focus on the first day of those demonstrations.
The first day was particularly brutal.
Yeah, the reporting indicates that on day one, there were hours of firing by security forces. Hours. And that sustained lethal violence resulted in the deaths of at least 19 Gen Z protesters in a single afternoon.
Hours of firing. That detail from the report is just chilling, and it fundamentally changes the narrative here.
It does.
We aren't talking about a momentary clash or like a single panicked skirmish at a barricade. We're talking about a sustained, fatal breakdown of order, and the immediate political fallout was massive.
Yeah, K.P. Sharma Oli, who was the prime minister at the time, was forced to resign shortly after.
What's fascinating here is how rapidly a specific anti-corruption grievance escalated into a fatal clash that fundamentally broke the social contract between the state and the youth.
Yeah, because in any functioning democracy, a government's primary non-negotiable mandate is the protection of its citizens, right?
Exactly. The bare minimum.
Right. When a state's security apparatus is involved in hours of sustained firing on its own young people, that contract doesn't just bend, it shatters entirely.
Yeah.
Oli's resignation was the first domino. It was a forced acknowledgement that his administration's moral authority to govern had completely evaporated.
It's like a pressure cooker finally blowing its lid.
Look.
But not just a regular pressure cooker, it's like a pressure cooker where the state intentionally welded the safety valve shut, ignored the gauge flashing in the red, and then acted totally surprised when the entire kitchen was leveled.
It's a great way to put it.
But I want to push back a little here. Massive protests happen globally without the head of state ultimately facing arrest, right?
Sure.
We see democratic backsliding and state violence around the world, and usually the leaders just quietly retire or, I don't know, flee to a sympathetic neighboring country.
Yeah, they get away with it.
Right. So what specifically made the findings of this Nepali investigation panel so legally dangerous for the top leadership?
See, that is the pivotal question of this entire deep dive, and the answer lies in the logistical brilliance of what the protest movement did after the streets cleared.
The follow-through.
Exactly. The anger from those tragic deaths didn't just dissipate into cynical apathy, which is the historical trap, right? The trap many protest movements fall into after a traumatic national event.
Right, they burn out.
They didn't just march and go home. Instead, that raw grief was systematically organized and directly channeled into the ballot box.
The electoral earthquake, they took the fight from the pavement to the polls.
Exactly. And this brings us to the changing of the guard. The momentum of the Gen Z protests created a sweeping, undeniable electoral mandate.
It was huge.
They bypassed traditional political patronage networks entirely. Just this month, the Rashtriya Swatantra Party won a landslide election victory.
And when we talk about a changing of the guard, we're talking about a contrast in leadership that almost feels scripted for a political thriller.
It really does.
The newly sworn-in Prime Minister is Balendra Shah. He is a rapper-turned-politician.
Yeah.
He didn't come up through the traditional party ranks. He was directly carried into office by the sheer force and organizational momentum of those Gen Z protests.
And you really have to contrast him with the old guard to appreciate the structural shock to the system here.
Oh, absolutely.
You have Balendra Shah, the 34-year-old rapper, stepping into the highest executive role previously held by K.P. Sharma Oli.
Right.
Oli is 74 years old. He is a quintessential, deeply entrenched establishment fixture in Nepali politics.
I mean, if you look up old guard in the dictionary, his picture's right there.
Definitely. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, we are witnessing an extreme, almost unprecedented case of generational whiplash.
Whiplash is the right word.
Right. Moving from a traditional 74-year-old entrenched leader to a rapper-turned-politician represents a total, uncompromising rejection of the old ways of doing business.
Yeah.
It shows how profound public grief and raw anger were systematically weaponized into a political machine. They didn't just protest the system from the outside.
No, they took it over.
They voted themselves into the driver's seat of that very system so they could control the levers of accountability.
It's like the country switched from classical music to hip-hop overnight in the halls of power, and the new administration immediately turned off the old sound system.
Great analogy.
But structurally, it means the entire bureaucracy suddenly has to answer to leadership that doesn't play by the unwritten rules of the old boys club.
Right.
And the timeline we are tracking in the Reuters dispatch is just incredible. Balendra Shah was sworn in as prime minister, and the very next day, the arrests began.
The very next day.
Which makes me wonder, and I'm sure you listening are wondering the exact same thing, does this rapid timeline suggest this is a mandate for justice, or is it political retribution?
Well, it is a razor-thin line, and that exact tension is what the legal arguments are currently wrestling with.
Yeah.
With the new government sworn in, the theoretical demands for justice that were shouted in the streets materialized into physical arrest warrants within 24 hours.
Incredible speed.
The speed is a deliberate show of force by the new administration, signaling that the era of impunity is over. But, it also opens them up to accusations of lawfare. We are now watching unprecedented legal arguments unfold in real time.
Right, so let's get into the actual mechanics of this accountability, because the details of these arrests are where the abstract concepts of justice meet the hard reality of criminal law.
Exactly.
On Saturday, K.P. Sharma Oli, the 74-year-old former prime minister, along with his former home minister, Ramesh Lakhak, were arrested by the Kathmandu police.
And notice the messaging from the state forces here. The police were very careful to clearly define their mandate.
How so?
Well, police spokesman Adhikari issued a formal statement confirming they are acting directly on the recommendations of the investigation commission.
Right, creating a buffer.
They are legally insulating themselves. Adhikari is essentially saying, hey, we aren't acting on a political whim from the new prime minister. We are executing a formal independent directive based on a judicial inquiry into the violence.
But the specific nature of the allegations is what makes this so legally complex and honestly fascinating.
Yes, absolutely.
According to the excerpts in the Commission's report, the panel held Oli responsible for negligence.
Right.
They are alleging that he failed to prevent the deaths and that he did not take action to stop the hours of firing on that first day of the protests.
Yes. This raises an important question about the boundaries of executive leadership and criminal liability.
Big boundaries.
Prosecuting a head of state for negligence, for an explicit failure to act, is incredibly difficult in any jurisdiction.
Yeah, I'd imagine.
It is one thing if prosecutors uncover a recording of a leader explicitly ordering the police to use lethal force on unarmed civilians.
Right, like a smoking gun.
Exactly. But prosecuting inaction, arguing that a leader's failure to stop the firing constitutes a criminal offense, is a massive legal hurdle. The burden of proof shifts dramatically.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because I want to challenge that concept of inaction being hard to prove. Wait a minute. International law has the doctrine of command responsibility, right? We saw this in the UN tribunals for Yugoslavia and Rwanda.
Yes, we did.
The precedent is there. If you are the commander, you know your security forces are committing crimes, and you do nothing to stop it. You are criminally guilty.
That's true.
So why is Nepal treating this under the framework of negligence rather than outright command complicity? How does a domestic court definitively prove a leader's inaction was criminal rather than just a failure of governance?
It's tricky.
How do you separate a slow, chaotic bureaucracy from willful criminal negligence?
It's a brilliant distinction to draw. See, command responsibility in international tribunals usually requires proving the commander had effective control and knew the crimes were about to happen or were actively happening.
Right.
In domestic law, prosecuting a former prime minister for negligence requires proving what the leader knew, exactly when they knew it, and what power they realistically had to intervene in that specific chaotic moment.
I see.
And that is where the Commission's report seems to hinge on that chilling phrase we discussed earlier, hours of firing.
Because it eliminates the excuse of chaos.
Exactly. Think of it like a corporate IT system. Prosecuting direct action is like finding the email where the CEO ordered a massive data breach.
Right. Direct evidence.
Prosecuting negligence is proving the CEO watched the server alarm flashing red for 3 straight hours, had the administrative password to shut the system down, but intentionally put their hands in their pockets and just watched it burn.
Oh, wow. That's a powerful way to frame it.
Yeah. The legal argument from the new administration will likely be that while the first 15 minutes of violence might be attributed to the chaos of a riot, hours of sustained firing implies that the top leadership was fully aware of the lethality and actively chose not to deploy their authority to issue a stand-down order.
And there are immediate logistical and, frankly, humanitarian factors complicating this physical arrest, too.
Yeah, health issues.
Exactly. The Reuters Dispatch notes that following his arrest, Oli, who again is 74 and has had 2 past kidney transplants, was transferred from the Kathmandu police office directly to a hospital.
Right. And health is often a massive complicating factor when prosecuting elderly former leaders.
It absolutely is, and it immediately shifts the optics. It allows the defense to frame the state's actions as not just politically motivated, but disproportionately cruel.
Which is exactly the angle the legal defense is already taking as they go on the offensive.
Yeah, they're not holding back.
Not at all. Oli's lawyer, Takaram Bhattacharya, spoke on the record to Reuters and explicitly called the arrest illegal and improper.
Strong words.
He labeled it completely unwarranted. His core argument is logistical. He's saying there's absolutely no risk of Oli fleeing the country and no risk of him avoiding questioning.
So why the physical arrest, right?
Exactly. Therefore, placing an ailing 74-year-old former head of state under physical arrest and putting him in a hospital, rather than simply issuing a summons for an interview, is an aggressive overreach by the new rapper-turned PM.
We should also note that the sources mentioned the former Home Minister, Ramesh Likak, and his lawyer couldn't be reached for comment.
Yeah, that silence is interesting in itself.
Very.
Often, co-defendants in these sprawling accountability cases will strategically remain quiet while they see how the primary target's defense holds up, you know? Or maybe they are negotiating their own legal positioning behind closed doors.
Sure, hedging their bets.
But Patra's vocal defense of Oli sets the stage for a massive courtroom battle.
And it's important for us to note, right here as we look at this, and we need to be very explicit about this, whether you, the listener, agree with Patrai's defense that this is an unwarranted act of political retribution.
Right.
Or you align with the new administration's claim that this is pure, long overdue justice. Our goal today is just to look at the mechanics of how the transition happened.
Yes. Just to be totally clear, we are impartially reporting the contents of the Reuters article and the Commission's report. We are not picking a side.
Exactly. We are not endorsing either political viewpoint. We are just mapping the architecture of this historical moment.
Absolutely. The geopolitical implications are huge, but our focus is purely on the structural mechanisms at play.
Yeah.
And looking at those mechanisms, there is a very strategic procedural note in the dispatch that highlights the aggressive posture of the new government.
That's it.
The police spokesman stated that Oli and Lekhak would be produced before the court on Sunday. And the Reuters dispatch specifically clarifies for an international audience that Sunday is actually a regular working day in Nepal.
Right, which means the legal momentum doesn't slow down for the weekend.
Precisely. In many political arrests, sweeping someone up on a Friday means the defense has the entire weekend to file injunctions, rally political supporters in the streets, and change the media narrative before a judge even looks at the paperwork.
Oh, that makes total sense.
By moving on a Saturday and presenting them to the court on Sunday, a working day, the new administration is executing a legal blitzkrieg.
A blitzkrieg.
Yeah, they are denying the old guard any temporal breathing room to organize a counter-narrative.
The speed from street protest to resignation to a sweeping electoral victory to an airtight legal blitzkrieg is just breathtaking. It's really a masterclass in modern political strategy.
It speaks to the absolute power of a demographic shift when it is properly organized.
Yep.
Gen Z in Nepal utilized both direct, disruptive action in the streets and the formal, procedural democratic process to effectuate a total systemic overhaul.
They used every tool available.
They didn't stop at forcing a resignation. They recognized that a resignation without accountability just leaves the door open for the old guard to return.
Right.
So they demanded and organized for a structural changing of the guard.
And they achieved it. So what does this all mean? When we take a step back and look at the entire picture we've painted today, this serves as a visceral, undeniably potent case study in the mechanics of political transitions.
It really does.
It is undeniable proof of how rapidly entrenched, seemingly invincible traditional power can fall when a mobilized younger generation demands ultimate transparency.
Yeah.
They didn't just want a new face sitting in the prime minister's chair. They wanted the old face held legally and physically accountable for the brutal cost of maintaining the status quo.
It truly is a blueprint for rapid institutional change.
Absolutely.
It demonstrates that public grief, when channeled away from despair and into the ballot box, is perhaps the most formidable political weapon a demographic can wield.
Well said.
The old establishment relied on the assumption that the youth would eventually tire out and go home. They didn't. They went to the polls.
But it also leaves us with something massive to think about moving forward. The tectonic plates of Nepali politics have shifted completely.
Yeah, totally realigned.
The old establishment building has been demolished, and a completely new youth-led structure has been built on top of the rubble in record time. But now, that new building has to weather the actual day-to-day realities of governing a complex nation.
Which is always the hardest part of any revolution, electoral or otherwise. Tearing down the old system is unifying. Running the new one is where the fractures begin.
Exactly. Which leaves you, the listener, with a final lingering question to ponder as we wrap up this deep dive. Now that a 34-year-old rapper-turned-politician, born directly out of a decentralized protest movement, holds the highest office in the land, What happens when the anti-establishment becomes the establishment?
That's the real test.
How will this new Gen Z-backed government handle the very same levers of state power, the very same slow bureaucracy, and the very same police forces that were so recently deployed against their own supporters?
It's going to be fascinating to watch.
Because the rapid transition might be over, but the incredibly complex reality of living and governing on this new ground has really just begun.